Hey everyone, and welcome. If you're even thinking about a career in the mortgage industry, well, there's one law you absolutely have to get your head around. We're talking about the SAFE Act. And in this explainer, we're going to crack that code and break down exactly what it is, why it's a thing, and what you need to do to play by the rules. So let's start with the big question right off the bat. Why all the rules? Seriously, why are there so many hoops you have to jump through just to become a mortgage loan originator? Well, as it so often does with financial rules, the answer lies in a crisis, one that pretty much shook the entire planet. That's right. You gotta remember, before 2008, things were kinda like the Wild West. The rules were a messy patchwork, and some loan originators had basically zero oversight. That, of course, led to some really bad practices and, frankly, unqualified people guiding families through the biggest financial decision of their lives. The SAFE Act was the direct response to that chaos, designed to make sure those kinds of abuses could never happen again. This isn't just bureaucracy for the sake of it, it's a shield built from some hard-learned lessons. And that shield is the SAFE Act. Now, the full name is a bit of a mouthful: the Secure and Fair Enforcement for Mortgage Licensing Act. It was passed in 2008 with a really clear mission: to create one single national standard for everybody originating mortgage loans. The goal was to set a baseline for professionalism and accountability all across the country. No more patchwork. Okay, so here's our game plan. First, we'll dig into the why behind the act. Then, we're going to walk you through the exact path to getting your license. After that, we'll tackle passing the big test and, just as important, keeping your license active. And finally, we'll zoom out and look at the big picture. Sound good? Let's do it. All right, let's kick off with Section 1, Why the SAFE Act Exists. And trust me, really getting the motivation behind these rules is the absolute key to remembering them, especially when you're staring down that exam. You know, at its heart, the SAFE Act is really about two things: regulating the industry and protecting you, the consumer. The way it does this is by creating something called the Nationwide Mortgage Licensing System, or NMLS. Think of it as the central command hub that registers and keeps tabs on every single loan originator. It even gives them a unique ID number, all to boost accountability and make sure you know exactly who you're dealing with. Okay, on to Section 2, your path to a license. Now we're getting into the nitty-gritty. What do you actually have to do to become a licensed mortgage loan originator? I like to think of it as clearing 5 key hurdles. And here they are. First up, a full-on background check. Second, they're going to take a close look at your criminal history. Third is a check of your financial responsibility, making sure your own house is in order. Fourth, you got to complete your pre-licensing education. And last but not least, hurdle number 5 is passing that national NMLS exam. Every single person has to clear all 5 of these. Now, this slide is super important, so pay close attention. The rules on criminal history are incredibly specific. A license will be denied flat out if you've had any felony conviction in the last 7 years. But, and this is the big one, if you've ever had a felony that involved stuff like fraud, dishonesty, a breach of trust, or money laundering, you're permanently disqualified. There's no 7-year window on those, ever. Now, before you can even think about sitting for the exam, you have to hit the books. The SAFE Act requires 20 hours of pre-licensing education, and it's not just any 20 hours. It's a very specific breakdown. 3 hours on federal law, 3 hours on ethics, which is huge, 2 hours on non-traditional mortgage products, and then the remaining 12 hours are other approved courses. Which of course brings us to Section 3, passing the big test. For a lot of people, this is the most stressful part of the whole process. But look, if you've done your coursework and you really understand these rules, you're going to be just fine. So let's talk about the magic number. It's 75%. That is the score you need to pass the NMLS national test. Not 74, not 74.9. You have to hit 75% or higher to move on. Period. It's a tough exam for sure. So a really common question is, what happens if you don't hit that 75 on your first go? Is your career over before it even starts? No way, not at all. But there are some very specific rules about retaking it that you absolutely need to know. The SAFE Act is crystal clear on this. After your first fail, you have to wait 30 days before you can try again. If you fail a second time, it's another 30-day waiting period. But here's the kicker. If you fail a third time in a row, the waiting period jumps all the way to 6 months. They want to make sure you really take the time to go back and master the material. Okay, so you did it. You passed the test, you got your license, congratulations. But the journey isn't over. Let's talk about Section 4, keeping your license active. This means you have to keep learning every single year to stay up to date on all the industry laws and practices. This slide shows the difference perfectly. You've got that initial, one-time 20-hour course to get you in the door. But after that, every single year, you have to complete 8 hours of continuing education, or CE. And just like the first time, that annual 8 hours has its own specific breakdown. 3 hours on federal law, 2 on ethics, and 2 on non-traditional mortgages. So, we've covered the why, the how, the test, and the upkeep. For Section 5, let's just zoom all the way out and look at the big picture. Why do all these specific kind of tedious rules matter so much? When you boil it all down, every single one of these rules, from the background check to the annual ethics class, is designed to do one main thing: build a mortgage industry that people can actually trust. By setting a high bar for getting in and demanding that you stay sharp, the SAFE Act is all about creating a culture of integrity, competence, and accountability. The SAFE Act was a massive step forward. It created a national standard where, believe it or not, there wasn't one before. But that does leave us with a pretty big question to think about. As technology and the market keep changing, what's the next frontier for protecting consumers in the lending world? That's something for all of us in this industry to keep in mind. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer.